Hi, welcome to Chapter 4. We're still in the module that includes both Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. In this chapter, we're talking about social interactions in everyday life. If you like this chapter, you might want to consider taking a psychology course and then specifically a social psychology course after that, because this module has a lot of psychology topics, and this chapter certainly does that. In this chapter, we're talking about social interactions, how we deal with other people, how they see us, how we respond to them. I want to talk about just two topics, two vocabulary words that sociologists use that you may or may not be familiar with, and those are the topics of status and role. The rest of the material on your study guide you can read about on the assigned pages in your textbook and on the lecture notes for the class. Your author does a pretty good job. So let's talk about status, and then let's talk about the concept of role. Status is a position that you hold in society. So right now you're in the status of student, but I'm sure there are many other statuses in your life. They may be the status of employee, they could be the status of being a son or daughter, or for some of you, being a parent. You could have the status of being a brother or sister, a spouse. All of those are statuses. Now, sociologists also have the concept of a master's status. And as it talks about in your textbook, sometimes a status is so important that others describe us that way. Here in the United States, often our master's status is our position, our job that we have. For example, imagine that you're at a party and somebody says, well, hi, my name is so-and-so, and who are you and what do you do? You introduce yourself by your name, and then you usually give the status of your job, your career. We as Americans just put a lot of emphasis on our careers as our master status. As your author also talks about, though, sometimes disabilities can be a master status. We may describe somebody who has a disability, whether it be a physical disability or a mental disability, in terms of that disability because it is so important in describing that person. So understand that concept of master status, that status that is so important that a person is often described that way. The other concept that students often have problems with is the concept of role. Think of the role as the behavior that goes along with a status. So for example, as a teacher, that's my status, master status. I have the roles of obviously teaching in front of classes, also teaching online like I'm doing here, grading, answering students' questions by phone, by email, by message. I also answer questions about careers. I advise students on courses to take to finish their degree and to transfer elsewhere. So there's a lot of different roles that I have as far as that one status of being a teacher or professor. Just because a status has the same label doesn't mean the roles are the same in various cultures. For example, let's take the role or the status of being a mother. In our country, in our culture, that status often has the role of taking care of children, but as many women in our country do, often mothers are also economic providers in our country. In other societies and other cultures, the role of or the status of mother does not include the role of economic provider. In other words, working outside the household. So think about the different roles that a similar status may have depending on the culture. The last thing I want to talk about in this short YouTube is role conflict. Think about when the role, the behavior for the status as student, conflicts with the role, the behaviors for another status that you have. I often have students experience role conflict between their status of student and their status of employee. You need to be in class to take a test, and you also need to be at work because something important's going on at work. That may be why many of you are taking a class online, is because you have that role conflict. Another role conflict that some of you may have is a role conflict between the expected behaviors of student, for example, in a seated class to have good attendance and to participate, and the roles of being a parent. If your child's sick, then that might take precedence over going to a class. So that could be where role conflict could come into being between two different statuses. So again, read the lecture notes, read your assigned pages, it's not the whole chapter, and answer the study guide questions. And I'll make another YouTube for the next important topic for the next module. Take care, have a good day.